Okay, so in getting ready for Atlanta Regionals, I was asked to give a breakdown of some different matchups. So this is going to be about Poison Archaludon. Probably, we'll talk about both Archaludon variants, Poison and the double Starmie Azul GG build of it. So let's talk about Poison first. So Poison, of course, is going to be built off of these cards and Archaludon, which I don't own. So a lot of this deck's power is going to come from the Brute Bonnet Binding Mochi being able to push Archaludon damage to 260, and then Poison obviously ticking up to 270. But for Zoroclef, see the beautiful new Alta Zoroark that I just pulled, 270 is not 280, which is extremely important. Um, this is probably one of the harder matchups for the deck. I definitely say it is Poison Archaludon favored, but if you know how to play it beforehand, you're going to be able to do a lot better. Sorry, I don't know why the camera does that. Um, you have a more efficient engine, and it's sort of the same inevitability that this deck runs into a lot, which is the longer the game goes, the more favored I'm going to be in the long run. And I think the main way you're winning this matchup is with this main line. Being able to get hit into and then immediately answer back with enough damage to take down a fresh Archaludon is super important, obviously. Even Virtuous Flame, just doing 170 is enough of a punch that it can be retaliated with on a follow-up Luxray. Luxray is able to drop down the next turn if they actually knock out the Zoroark or knock out something on bench. You go Luxray with the Reversal Energy. Once 180, 170, enough to knock out an entire Archaludon. So this is a strong line. It also forces your opponents to take the two prizer, which is very important for the next line, which would be a Petron line. So deep into the game, you want them to have taken 5 prizes, because at 5 prizes, Petron becomes a very viable attacker. Irritated Outburst does 60 times for each prize your opponent's taken, so able to scale up to 300 if your opponent's taken enough knockouts, and of course that is the number to beat for Archaludon. So there can be late game scenarios where you go for this early Zoroark, tank a hit, swing back, Virtuous Flame 170, knockout, Luxray 180, punch, knockout, and then you respond with either Clefairy or Terrapagos, they knock that out, and then you go, all right, PP up, E switch, attach to Petron, swing, hit in for game. That is another one of the very important lines for the deck. I think that is important to note and understand going into it. Petron is really strong in this matchup. It's one of the few where it really gets to shine as an Irritated Outburst. Now, if they are on even prizes, it gets kind of weird. Um, Maybe sometimes they would be on weird numbers because of the poison, but the chances of that aren't really high. But the aggressiveness of the deck is definitely intimidating. Something else important to note is Perilous Jungle. I don't have a copy on me now, but its text specifically prohibits it from doing extra damage to dark types, meaning it will not do extra damage to Zorua on a donk, and it will not do extra damage to Zoroark when your opponent's trying to knock it out in one hit with Archaludon. They cannot crack this unless they are one of the few variants playing something like a Black Belt's Training. Unless they're playing that, they can't crack a Zoroark, which is very important. So just remember, it's safe to open Zorua alone, but if you know you're going into the matchup, or even if you're just worried about it playing into the day, open 2 Pokemon, or if you have Zorua, you're safe to just open the Zorua. Another important thing to note is the damage threshold. Clefairy has an important damage threshold for the matchup, which is Area 0, Terra, for get a pretty average board, something like this. This Clefairy with a Defiance Band is able to swing 310 and knock out a Archaludon. Most Archaludons are even going to be damaged in this matchup because they're going to be poisoned so often. So Clefairy actually becomes a pretty relevant attacker, just being able to go to burst Full Moon Rondo. But keeping stadium control in this matchup is so tough that going for this extreme bomb option is pretty difficult. Terapagos this is probably its weakest matchup as an attacker because it is completely unable to stay on the board and really stick any meaningful damage. Yes, it can go in for 240, but that last 60 is like not very good. It can maybe be cleaned up by a Darm play if you're able to go like Reversal Energy Darm, crack the active Archaludon, knock out like a Petron on bench, or even going for a Gust on a second Archaludon, Reversal Energy, go 180 to the face, 90 knock out the bench. Like a play like that could come up, but the Terapagos is so easy to get cracked that it makes it very difficult for it to ever really come up, except for just being the bench sitter that fills your bench for Area 0 for Lily's Clefairy to go off, and for the room for Zoroark. So the matchup is pretty simple. It is very straightforward. Also important to note for the matchup, probably another one of the average lines for the deck, which is the Reversal Luxury Defiance. When it comes down, it's going to threaten their Pheasantipede a lot, and it's always good to pressure a Pheasantipede. If you're able to do this, I would definitely go for it. It's going to immediately put pressure on the board. Swing it, do that 210. As long as it's on the board, a copy of Pheasantipede wouldn't be safe. But in this matchup, it should be noted that the Defiance Band is important to go onto the Clefairy if you feel you need that line. But it's also, of course, just true that you can go for a line like Zoroark plus Reshiram, take damage, swing back to knockout, Luxury Defiance. So this gets knocked out, Luxury Defiance, swing in for a knockout. And the game has a progression sort of like that. That can come up. That a game state like that can happen. I think understanding how many lines there are for every given matchup is one of the most important ways to play this deck perfectly. It's just this matchup particularly has some really narrow margins on the correct lines for every matchup. But so from that, I'm going to move into the second build, which is this sort of double based. It's got like double. It pressures trolleys out, gets Staryu and Starmie. It plays a Black Belt's training. This build is also very scary. I'd say this is the scarier version of the two, mainly because it is more consistent. My friend Sky got 9th, I believe, at the Full Grip Games big event with this list, so I know it's extremely terrifying. It's very scary. Beating this is very similar. We have a bunch of the similar lines. Clefairy with the Defiance Band, a late game Petulant. But the Zoroark Reshiram line is a lot more frail because a Staryu, which not a very known card, so I'll explain. It will discard itself from bench, ping 2 damage onto the board. It's like a budget Dusclops. It will put 20 damage on Zoroark, which will push it into range of getting knocked out by a Black Belt's training boosted Archaludon, which is terrifying because Zoroark getting one shot is very scary in the matchup. So all in all for this matchup, it is you kind of have to rely a little less on that Zoroark line and a little more on your late game Petulant, and sort of focusing and targeting down their bench. So a lot of a luxury line is very strong against their developing Pheasantipede, and even Darm lines, Darm with the Reversal Energy, can knock out the Staryu and the Wooloo as they try and set up, or it can knock out an evolving Archaludon and put 90 onto another to pressure the damage later. I guess another important thing to note, Luxray, Defiance, Reversal, Darm. With the Defiance, these two in any combination can knock out an Archaludon. So this does 210, gets cleaned up by a 90. This does 120, cleaned up by a 180. So that is another way to knock out Archaludon with pretty exclusively single prizers. But I definitely think that this matchup is super intimidating. I also think it is important to actually target the doubles because if they play a lower boss count, and them being able to have Gust on Terapagos and Latios is terrifying, and on the Petrunt too. All of them are big targets for the Archaludon to come down and just gust them up and swing for an easy 2 prize cards with no... And if you don't have any good action on retaliation, it's hard. Though sometimes they will go to pop a Staryu on the Terapagos to get the knockout, which could make your Zoroark slightly safer, but it's not super often that something like that's going to happen, because a smart player will probably save it for the Zoroark. But then again, this matchup is so unknown, they're not really going to know what is going to be the threat, which is another one of the big selling points of this list, which is a surprise factor. So that is pretty much how the matchup boils down. I'd say both are probably 60-40. I'd say you're maybe a little more even with the poison build, just because of their inability to crack through a Zoroark super convincingly unless it already has damage on it. It's not a great matchup, and it's definitely one I would be worried to hit, because I do think Azul has put the deck into the public knowledge and made it very good. So I would definitely be prepared for it. I would do whatever kind of preparation you can for it. Thank you for listening, and I'm going to make another one of these.